This is a war. I submit to you that if you want to learn who rules over you, find out who you cannot criticize.
Pam prior, and it looks like she's just taunting everybody. What is she doing with drawing Muhammad? And it looks like she's actually taunting people. And it's disgusting that it happened and everything else. But why are they drawing Muhammad? Isn't there something else they could draw?
Well, I will not abridge my freedom so as not to offend savages. And we weren't denigrating the religion. Political cartoons is political opinion. And when you seek to impose the Sharia restrictions of Islam on free speech, that is a political movement.
Yeah, but for her to go in, and I guess she makes money doing this, something has to happen. What is she doing it for? This has nothing to do with free speech.
Anyone that does the work that we do is smeared, defamed, and libeled. Our name is dragged through the mud. But we do it, and we continue to suffer the abuse and the slings of arrows, because what is at stake is our very freedom.
Somebody will say, oh, freedom of speech, freedom of speech. These are foolish people.
So do you see a Charlie Hebdo comparison with what you did, is the question?
They died for their speech, and that's what we stand with. We stand with, I may have a difference of opinion, but I will fight to the death their right to say it.
Last thing we need is an obnoxious blowhard like Geller to go out and start trouble when there's no reason for it. There's absolutely no. I'm a bigger believer in free speech than she is, believe me. And I think it's very, very important.
Somebody will say, oh, freedom of speech, freedom of speech.
As far as Mr. Trump goes, he sure flaps his tongue and uses free speech and wishes to silence others. There's a war going on.
What do you think of that?
Well, there certainly is a war going on, and she should be much more responsible, because what she's doing is unnecessary. I'll give you an example. Let her go out and talk about Jesus.
Why doesn't the left expect Muslims to behave just the way Catholics and Jews and Christians do when their religion is mocked? They somehow give a special status, a special class to Muslims, expecting them to act savagely. I do not.
She's using this to show free speech. She's not using it for anything, and she's using it for her own purpose. She's a person that is doing this for her own purpose, Neil, and she's doing a terrible thing for our country.
It's not about me. It's about adhering to the Sharia. I was targeted for beheading because I blasphemed against Muhammad.
As part of the global jihad, and 51% of those polled agreed that Muslims in America should have the choice of being governed according to Sharia. You know what Sharia is?
I'm not a Muslim. I do not adhere to the Sharia. People need to learn about the jihadic doctrine, not shut people up that are talking about it.
Last thing we need is an obnoxious blowhard like Geller.
Quran 47:4, slay the non-believers wherever you find them, strike them at their necks. It's pure, literal Islam. And by shutting me up and disarming the American people at what now is the gravest threat to our national security is a recipe for disaster.
Sharia authorizes such atrocities as murder against non-believers who won't convert, beheadings, and more unthinkable acts that pose great harm to Americans, especially women. I mean, you look, especially women. Tough stuff.
I'm not looking to denigrate anybody. I'm looking to rise everybody up and equality for all before the law. This country, the elemental element was freedom of speech.
So a number of prominent writers are opting out and protesting the events tonight. What do you think of that?
Well, I fully understand them opting out, and I know nothing about the magazine, but they were taunting, and they really taunted, and guess where they are right now?
You should be directing your barbs at the enforcers of the Sharia and those that seek to destroy and crush freedom of speech the way they did in Paris and in Copenhagen.
Listen, absolutely.
And across the world.
I only say this. Nobody believes stronger in free speech than me.
Somebody will say, oh, freedom of speech, freedom of speech. These are foolish people.
I may have a difference of opinion, but I will fight to the death their right to say it.
But for her, with all the problems this country has, for this woman that nobody ever heard of, to go out and taunt, and that's what she's doing, and provoke, nobody believes stronger in free speech than me.
This is political Islam, seeking to impose the restrictions on free speech. And You're asking me to abridge my speech so as not to offend savages.
I have absolutely no respect for her. She's putting people at great danger.
It's required under Islam that they change the religion. It's required that I abridge my speech, and I will not.
But why, with all the problems we have, why taunt?
What do you make of what we're seeing now?
But you do believe overall there is a Muslim problem in the world?
Well, there is a Muslim problem, absolutely. You just have to turn on your television set.
And do you think it encompasses all Muslims?
No, and that's the sad part about life, because you have fabulous Muslims. I know many Muslims, and they're fabulous people. They're smart, they're industrious, they're great. Unfortunately, at this moment in time, there is a Muslim problem in the world.
No one is saying that there aren't peaceful Muslims, but there is a problem in Islam, as illustrated last night, and anyone that addresses it gets attacked in this same way.
I have absolutely no respect for her. She's putting people at great danger.
You're saying that if something I say offends someone, then they have the right to behave in a certain way, that it's going to incite them. I think it's ridiculous. I think the blasphemy laws under the Sharia is ridiculous.
I think Pam Geller is a terrible messenger. I think she's terrible. And what she's doing, we have enough problem without taunting and driving everybody crazy.
I'm not concerned with Muslims, especially peaceful Muslims. I am concerned with the 25% that support Sharia.
How does one then handle free speech and yet remain sensitive to everyone?
Well, look, free speech is very important. Somebody will say, oh, freedom of speech, freedom of speech. These are foolish people. But you want to be smart about it, and you don't want to provoke people.
Last thing we need is an obnoxious blowhard like Geller.
I would bomb the shit out of him.
But why, with all the problems we have, why taunt?
I have absolutely no respect for her. She's putting people at great danger.
What is your security like now, Pam?
Well, I'm under 24-hour guard with a literal army of security, because that is what is required in light of the ISIS fatwa calling for my death, which is what was inspiring these jihadists in Boston, as well as, I suspect, what they were picking up at their terror mosque.
I would just bomb those suckers.
Why taunt?
I'd blow up the pipes. I'd blow up the I'd blow up every single inch. There would be nothing left.
Last thing we need is an obnoxious blowhard.
And you don't want to provoke people. I'd blow up every single inch. There would be nothing left.
But why, with all the problems we have, why taunt?
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown.
They were taunting, and they really taunted, and guess where they are right now?
Of Muslims entering the United States, until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on.
We need to have this conversation, and the fact that we have to spend upwards of $50,000 in security speaks to how dangerous and how in trouble freedom of speech is in this country. And then we have to get on these news shows, and somehow we are, those that are targeted, those that were going to be slaughtered, are the ones who get attacked. Speaks to how morally inverted this conversation is.
I have absolutely no respect for her.
And allowing this abridgment of our freedoms, this slow, Sharia, consistently impeding what we can and cannot say, this has to stop. And I call on all Americans to stand up.
I think Pam Geller is a terrible messenger. I think she's terrible.
Well, it'll certainly wake up the American people to this violent assault on our most basic freedom. And people will begin to realize that this war is here. You know, you read about it in Europe, literally opening fire on a French magazine weekly and slaughtering cartoonists and journalists, and thinking that this is, well, that's Europe and they have these problems that we don't have. We have them. And people need to wake up, and we need to take a firm stand for freedom of speech, and we will not abridge our freedoms so as not to offend savages. And this is really, I think, the battle between freedom and slavery. It is that basic.
She's a person that is doing this for her own purpose, Neil, and she's doing a terrible thing for our country.
Are you afraid for your own life now?
Of course I am, but I'm more afraid of doing nothing.
Somebody will say, oh, freedom of speech, freedom of speech. These are foolish people.
We refuse to allow jihadists to dictate what we can and cannot say. That is the point of this conference. That is the point of freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is the foundation of a free society. Boom. Literally. Without it, a tyrant can wreak havoc unopposed, while his opponents are silenced.
I would just bomb those suckers.
Boom.
I'd blow up the pipes. I'd blow up the I'd blow up every single inch. There would be nothing left.
This is a war. I submit to you that if you want to learn who rules over you, find out who you cannot criticize.